They say it takes a village to raise a child, and it really does. That is absolutely true. So at age 9 years old, I was taken away from this village. I had my aunt there, and I had a whole bunch of women who were around my mother's age who all decided to have children in the mid-70s. That, you know, they were all just going to have children and they didn't need a man, but there was this support system there of other mothers that I could go to if something was wrong, or, you know, I could be watched when my mother had to work. So I was taking out of the village, out of the hometown, out of like the area where I felt safe, and we moved to Connecticut where my narcissistic uncle was opening a restaurant. So from age 9 years old, I was taken out of the village, I was put into a 2-bedroom apartment, and I was left there for 80 hours a week. Now this, you know, she did this so she could go off and work for her narcissistic brother at his restaurant and make his dreams come true. So, you know, I've read a lot about latchkey kids and how this is becoming really standard. You know, the child gets home from school at 2, 3 o'clock, and then the mother is home from work at 5, 6 o'clock. This was not the case for me. Okay, I would get home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was left alone until 11 o'clock, midnight, when she got home. So I was alone all this time, for all these hours. A fire broke out in the kitchen, and it was a grease fire, and I didn't know that you're not supposed to use water, so I just grabbed the hose and started spraying everything down, and it spread a little bit. It was a miracle that I managed to get it out by myself at 9 years old. And there wasn't really a lot of damage. I think like some things, like some napkins got burnt or something. I don't remember. I cleaned it up really well, and then she never found out what happened. There was also, I decided to do things when I was alone at 9 years old that 9-year-olds will do. I decided, oh, I'm going to melt down all my crayons and make a candle. Because to this day, I still love to make candles. So, but at 9 years old, I didn't know about flashpoints and that the wax can burst into flames. So it's a miracle that didn't happen. I would take the window prisms and glue them to the biggest kitchen knife that we had, and then pretend I was Shira walking around for hours waving the biggest kitchen knife around the apartment. Again, it's amazing that I'm here today to tell this tale. So she did all this so she could work for my uncle for 80 hours a week. And like I said, it was just constant alone. One of my friends said to me that if this was happening today, you would have been removed from my social services, because this was an extreme case of child neglect. I was raised like a plant. She was home on Sundays. Monday through Saturday, she was gone for like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So yeah, it was like Sunday, I watered it this week. Okay, done. My diet really suffered. We ate pasta from my uncle's restaurant 7 nights a week. So for 7 nights a week, we had pasta, and there was no balance. There was no protein in my diet. There was no vegetables in my diet. This caused severe mood swings and fatigue. So I was tired all the time, but I also couldn't sleep because it gave me candida, yeast overgrowth in my system as a child, which caused insomnia. So I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep, and then she would get really mad at me when I couldn't wake up for school in the morning. I was expected to, you know, do my homework and feed myself and go to bed and get up and be like, there was this invisible other parent that was always home helping me do these things, that I should just always know how to do my homework and, you know, go to bed, what bedtime was, and to make dinner and to feed myself. And, you know, then socially, when I couldn't make friends because I was so messed up emotionally and had such severe social anxiety disorder, she was so, you know, just make her really mad why I couldn't make friends. Why can't you just make friends? She'd be like, you are so cute, you are so pretty, you are such a cute little girl, why can't you make friends? What's wrong with you? Other people who had 2 parents, their houses seemed like Norman Rockwell paintings to me. I would go over to my friend's house and I would be like, you guys eat so fancy. You have a mother that cooks a hot meal, and then you sit down together at a table and eat? That's so fancy. And she was like, what are you talking about? We don't eat fancy, we just eat normally. It was fancy to me because normal to me was, you know, tray tables in front of the television completely by myself, or with my mother who was, you know, reheating leftovers from the restaurant. My mom was born the oldest girl in a family of 3 boys and 3 girls. And my grandfather was a total chauvinist. Thought that sending a woman to college was a complete and total waste of time. My mom told me that her father thought that sending a woman to college was as useful and as productive as sending a dog to college. Those were her exact words, how she described her father. Once they were watching TV as a family and a commercial for a women's college came on, and my mom said she wanted to go, and my grandfather got up and hit her. So my mom admitted to me that she was an abused child. She was raised with a lot of abuse, and she was pushed down so low in her own childhood. Now, I saw a lot of conflict within my mother, always. I was born in 1975, and so she, by the time she had me, sort of a product of this hippie generation. Women's lib was, that movement was very strong at the time. She was very into being this strong, independent woman. But there was also this abused little girl inside of her, and so my whole life I watched her struggle with who she was versus who she should be. She got married at 19 years old as a means to get out of her father's house. This was her only option for women during that time. So she got married at 19, had her first child at 19, and then later on, that marriage, of course it did not work out, because when you get married and you're that young, it's so hard to, you don't even know who you are, let alone who you're supposed to be in this relationship, in this marriage. So that fell apart. So I grew up hearing that love was impossible, love was an illusion. She had one bad marriage, and she had such bad experience in her own childhood, that love was just not real. That's what I was taught. It didn't exist, it wasn't real, I was never going to find it. So I was raised by a single mother who firmly believed that. So she got married, got divorced. She had 2 kids within that marriage, my 2 older brothers. Then after the divorce, she ended up having to share my brothers with her ex-husband. So her ex-husband moved to Long Island, and she was in upstate New York. And so there was this, several hour driving distance between where she was and where her children were when they were at their father's house. So she always told me I wanted a daughter so badly. And looking back on it and sort of putting the pieces together of the story, I think she did not want to share me with anybody else. So she got pregnant. My father was a alcoholic, drug addict, schizophrenic. So not the best candidate. If you're going to have a baby with someone, this is not someone that you would choose. And I always wondered, why would you choose this man to have a baby with? And I think she wanted someone who was not dependable, was not going to stick around, because this baby's mine. I'm not sharing this baby with anybody. I think was sort of like the headspace that, she was in when she had me. Now there's 2 versions of this story that I've heard. The first one, the story of how I was conceived, was my mom really wanted a daughter, and this was going to be such a spiritual experience, and she was asking God to send her a daughter, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She was going to have this daughter with this man, even though she knew he was not going to stick around because she was such a strong woman and she could do this. Now the other version of the story that I've heard is this is the more realistic version of how I was conceived, was she was completely shocked and had no idea, I didn't know what to do, and was contemplating having an abortion. There's these 2 versions I've heard of how I was conceived, and then, the decisions that she made after she got pregnant. I don't really care anymore what the actual story was. It doesn't really mean anything to me anymore, but it was just this constant, I think this was the beginning of all the stories I would hear in my life. It was kind of like, reality is a certain way, but I'm going to tell you a story of how it's different. Okay, this was the first of many times in my life where this would be the case. I was born at home. It was 1975. And again, 2 different versions of this story. The one my mom always told me is, this was such a spiritual, wonderful experience, and I had you at home, and your brothers were there in the room, and it was such an amazing spiritual experience, blah, 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 blah. The story that I heard that I was later was the doctor who agreed to do the home delivery was on drugs she called him and said the baby's coming, and he said, oh, I'm really, like, I don't even know what they were. He was on a bunch of downers. That's all I remember from the story. Something that made him really, you know, just completely mellow and laid back. So his girlfriend, in order for him to come to my mom's house and deliver this baby, shot him up with speed. So this is how I came into the world, okay? Again, 2 different stories. Spiritual experience. The doctor was on 2 different types of drugs. Unbelievable. Okay, so that's how I came into the world, and it's amazing that I'm here alive today to tell this tale. In the media right now, there's this real sort of trend that this 80s nostalgia, the 70s nostalgia, that this time, this 80s and 70s and 80s was just this wonderful, magical time to be a kid. No, it wasn't, okay? People did things to their children in the 70s and 80s that parents today would look at and just, you know, scream child abuse, child neglect, abandonment. People did things in the 70s and 80s that, like, parents raising their children today would look at. And a lot of people who were raised in the 70s or 80s, who are now parents, look back at this time and they cannot believe the things that their parents in the 70s and 80s thought were acceptable. For instance, we drove on completely bald tires in the snow with no seat belts and got baby seats. What was a baby seat? I never had a baby seat. I sat in the car next to my mom in the front seat with no seat belt. I remember, you know, driving in the truck, her friend's truck, he would like drive like this with like one arm around me and on the steering wheel, no seat belts. And they did this in the wintertime when snow was all over the ground. Okay, this was socially acceptable. There was, you know, standards of living. My brothers in the wintertime used to have to go and take leaves and put them all around the houses because we lived in these places with no insulation, because that's how poor we were. The bathroom in the earliest house, or the second earliest house I can remember growing up, the wallpaper was holding up the bathroom walls. Like if you went over and like leaned on it, it would be like, okay, that's how poor we were. So money was always something to panic over in my house. We never had enough. It was always something to panic over. And I kind of also got a sleep disorder because my mom would go out and leave me alone with strangers or, you know, babysitters or, you know, family friends at my aunt's house 7 nights a week. She worked in restaurants. So we were always we never had the same schedule. And again, she was a single parent. She was my only parent. So I developed a sleep disorder because I could never fall asleep unless I was in my bed alone, and she was home, which almost never happened. There was this total instability of never being in your own bed, always being shuffled off to somebody else's house because she was a single parent and she had to make money and she had to work at night. I was raised with, you can't do it. You cannot do it. Don't even bother trying to do it. You know, she was raised with these messages, and then she had children and she taught them the exact same thing. You can't do that. Don't even bother trying to do it. I wanted to take gymnastics. It was just like, no, you're not athletic. Don't even bother trying. Don't even think about trying it. Don't even enjoy the idea of trying it for 5 minutes. You can't do it. I know everything. I'm the adult. I'm telling you, you can't do it. And it was basically, she didn't want to be bothered paying for the lessons. And she didn't want to be bothered spending the time taking me to and from lessons. So anything that I was interested in, I just never got a chance to do. I was just told I wouldn't be good at it, and I don't even bother trying it. So I had no self-awareness. I had no idea who I was or what I liked. Because the years where you're supposed to be a kid and be able to figure that out, I never got a chance to. I was never allowed to feel proud of myself. I was never allowed to try anything. Homework, oh my God. If I didn't understand how to do math or science or any subject, it was just, well, I'm going to get an F because no one is here to help me do it and nobody cares. So why should I care? The cigarette smoke that some of us grew up with in the 70s and 80s. Oh my God. My mom smoked a carton of cigarettes a week. She smoked when she was pregnant with me, and she smoked up until the time where I was 15 years old, a carton of cigarettes a week. I actually think that her working so much and not being around was in a way a blessing in disguise, because it certainly lessened the amount of cigarette smoke I was exposed to. But, you know, I was born in Woodstock in 1975, so I grew up inhaling secondhand cigarette smoke and secondhand marijuana smoke, pot smoke. And she smoked pot when she was pregnant with me. She smoked pot throughout my entire life. And not only that, she would have parties and all her friends would come over and they would all be smoking. I have video footage of my nephew's first birthday. I was 10 years old when he was 1 year old. So video footage of, it's November, we're at my nephew's birthday party, it's 1986, and all the windows are closed because it's November, and there's 30 adults in this apartment smoking around this 1 year old child. This was common. Everybody did this in the 70s and 80s. Now, what this gave me personally was a lifetime of severe sinus problems, obviously. Basically, the first 15 years of my life, my sinuses were just closed all the time. I could never breathe through my nose. That was my normal. I didn't even know what it was like to have a clear nose until I was about 15 when she stopped smoking. This was, sinus infections and headaches, and I still struggle with this every day of my life. And, just constantly being around cigarette smoke. And the only reason she quit is because I was in health class and my health teacher was telling us how bad it was. This was 1990 at the time, when I was a teenager, and she refused to stop smoking. So I just kind of went to protest. I said, I'm not getting in the car with you. I'm not hanging out in this living room with the window closed in the wintertime, watching TV with you. I'm not doing anything with you until you quit smoking. I'll be in my room with the door closed and the window opened. Goodbye. It's me or the cigarettes. And she chose me. It was the only time in my life I can ever remember her choosing me. Always picked the narcissist over me, but that's how I got her to quit smoking. And I got 25% of what I needed. I got food, same food every night, but technically it was food, and shelter. There was no encouragement, there was no support, there was no, time. I wasn't worth my mom's time. She had something, better to do, which was to go off and make money. So through her words, she'd be like, I love you so much, I really love you. But her actions always said to me, I have something better to do. And that's why, as an adult, with relationships, romantic relationships and friendships, I always manifested people who said they cared about me, but their actions were always, I have something better to do. Please subscribe. If you've been a victim of narcissistic abuse, please comment below. Please find support groups. They're out there. You can heal from this. So if you're interested in hearing more, please subscribe. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Blessed be.